What's up, you guys? Slasher Movies, and today we're going to be doing a spoiler-heavy review for Mockingjay Part 2. I cannot even believe it! Oh my god. So therefore, if you don't want to be spoiled or whatnot, go check out my non-spoiler review instead. So let's get started here. Oh my god, you guys, this movie was just the most cinematic and breathtaking finale I personally ever could want for a finale for the Hunger Games film. I loved this movie, you guys, and I've honestly just loved all the films and the experiences that they've brought me, you guys. It just has been an incredible journey, you guys. Personally, I love the way that this movie opens up. We see the neck brace coming off of Katniss, and it truly feels like we haven't left it. This feels like it's picking up moments where part 1 left off. So it's helping making this part 1 and part 2 feel like one giant movie. And while I know a lot of people have shared their distaste of splitting Mockingjay into 2 parts, and I will share my 2 cents on it. No, it didn't need to be 2 movies. You could have made a 2-hour and 40-minute movie that had that sort of rapid pace of catching fire and probably would have still worked. But I don't know. I still like part 1 and part 2. I think they're justifiable 80% of the time, you know. And I think certain scenes would have gotten cut or on the cutting room floor, but we actually get to experience those. So, at the end of the day, I'm not bitter or upset that there's 2 parts to them due to the fact that I still enjoyed both of them. Back to the film. Katniss Everdeen is ticked off after everything Peeta just did to her. She basically goes to Coin and is like, yeah, I want to kill President Snow right now. Send me to the Capitol. But she's like, no. You got to go to District 2 first. So she goes to District 2. And I will admit, District 2 is probably the weakest part of the whole movie for me. Just because I felt like we didn't quite spend enough time there. And Commander Lime's role is incredibly decreased in this movie. She has like 1 scene. So we didn't get to see her die or anything like that. But it was still good because I really liked that speech that was given, you know, to the rebels. Like, I'm done being a piece in his game and killing his slaves. You know, it just goes around and around. Oh, such a great freaking line. I love that line. Overall, it does feel a bit rushed, this scene. So I would have liked to spend a little bit more time in District 2. Now, Mockingjay Part 2 had some action sequences. And the action sequences were so great. I loved the first real big action sequence we got with that tar. It was so intimidating when Peeta threw that guy into it and it pulled him up and like everyone's running for their lives and they're running up the steps and all that stuff. It was so fantastic. But the best action sequence in this entire movie unfortunately has to be the sewer sequence that happens when they realize that they're not going to survive above ground. So they go underneath the sewer and President Snow finds out, so he sends these lizard mutations after them in the sewer, and it feels like it's straight out of a horror movie like The Descent. And like the lizards are everywhere and they're popping out of nowhere. It's so loud and rough, and Katniss is all like shooting her arrow everywhere, and Finnick is out there with his trident and he's like, oh my god, it was so intense. It was so intense. That moment where like everyone's trying to escape, they're crawling up the tunnel and whatnot, and Finnick loses his trident and he's trying to fight with a knife in his bare hands, and he ends up basically sacrificing himself for Katniss and the gang, and Katniss tries to go and he's like, Finnick! And Katniss' scream, it was so intense, and she screams Nightlock 3 times, explodes it, killing Finnick and all the lizards and putting Finnick out of his misery. It was such a sad moment because Finnick has gone through so much. I mean, the Capitol made him this human trafficking victim and exploiting his body. And he finally found love through Annie Cresta, and it just sucks to know that he didn't make it back. Oh my god, we totally forgot to talk about Finnick and Annie's wedding. Ugh, duh. I loved it. I know I'm going to say I loved it a lot, but I did. I loved it. I loved Finnick and Annie's wedding. It was great to see those 2 happy, but it was also really cool to see Joanna Mason. She delivered that awesome line about how you have to lose yourself to kill, and it was cool to see that awesome line from Joanna Mason when she was talking about how Katniss was like, you should have been the Mockingjay. Well, her response was, well, nobody likes me. It's just, and now basically after the part that they meet the rebels, it's basically time to storm through the Capitol. They start getting prepared and all this stuff, and then they meet Lieutenant Jackson, and let's talk about Miss Lieutenant Jackson. This woman was intimidating. Yeesh. I mean, she comes up and her entrance is like, Hathor, Everdeen, come meet your new squad. And I'm like, dang, this woman's voice is deep. Can we switch? Okay, you guys, we've got to talk about Prem's scene, you guys. Katniss and Gale, they're walking through the Capitol. They're trying to get to his mansion. And then they get there and, crap hits the fan. Everyone's running all over the place. And, that shot of the little girl looking in the yellow dress, looking for her mother. And then they see them picking up the kids or whatnot. And they're like throwing them over. And then all of a sudden I'm like, no, this is that moment. And then you see the hovercraft, and you see the parachutes, and you see everyone's hands go boom, 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 boom. And there's that shot of that man holding that kid. Prem, she's coming out there, she's doing it, and Katniss is like, Prem! Boom! Explosion! And you see Katniss fly back, and she's on fire. She's literally the girl on fire at this moment. And it happened so quickly and abrupt, and then it basically cuts. And it was just so intense. And I think they really captured in this moment what it felt like when you read the book. Because when it happened, I was like, oh my god. Did Prem just die? Wait, did Prem die? Oh my god, I had to go back and reread it like 3 times. Now, I want to talk about the council meeting that they had with all the victors after everything. And they're prepping to kill Snow and all that stuff. And they're deciding the fate of whether or not they should have, a sort of another Hunger Games, to say the least. And it always blew my mind, to say the least, that Katniss was like, yes, I want to have one. She, of course, was like for Prem, but it still never made sense when I read it in the book. But it finally makes sense to me why she said yes in the movie. She said yes because she knew Coin was turning bad. She knew Coin was not going to be any better than President Snow. But she knew that if she had said no, President Coin was not going to let Katniss Everdeen walk out there with a bow and arrow. And then when we get to that big pivotal scene, where it's between Katniss and President Snow, and she literally flings her arrow up and shoots Coin, it was such a satisfying moment. Now, granted, though, I will admit, though, I had a little bit of an issue with this moment, simply because I felt like they kind of set it up a little too on the nose. Like, you knew she was going to sling her arrow up. She was just so perfectly standing there in her big old speech, like, may your aim be as pure as your heart. She did. But what was the best part about this whole scene was President Snow's reaction. His mouth opens up. He starts laughing. You can see the blood in his mouth. It was so fantastic. And everyone's going insane. They're like running all over the place. Peter's like, what'd you do? No, there's something so satisfying about the way President Snow dies in this whole franchise. Not by the hands of Katniss Everdeen, but by the hands of his people. It's just so satisfying. Also really adored that moment in the ending sequence when you see Katniss and Peeta. They're trying to get their lives back together. And there's that scene where they have the door opening and they're just watching the rain fall. It's so peaceful and quiet. And it reminded me of that moment when they're in the Capitol and they're looking out the window and they're seeing this world and their fears and their, horrors. It's one of honestly, my favorite moments in the entire film. But my favorite moment in this entire film is, of course, the scene with Buttercup. I thought the scene with Buttercup was so emotional, so perfect. It was basically this moment of release for Katniss Everdeen, and it's honestly one of my favorite moments Jennifer Lawrence has ever given as an actress. It was just so perfect. Now, the epilogue. I personally love the epilogue to this film. Some can argue saying that, it wasn't really needed, and no, it wasn't, but it was just bittersweet, and it was just really cool to see a word-for-word epilogue play out. And what's so great about this scene is if you go back and watch all the films, which I did leading up to Mockingjay Part 2, the first film opens up with Prem waking up from a nightmare, and Katniss is there to comfort her, and she comforts her by singing Deep in the Meadow. Something so full circleness about it, seeing in the film where, her child wakes up from a nightmare and she's like telling her, I play this little game, I make a list of all the good things people have done. I know it gets tedious, but there are far worse games to play. And Deep in the Meadow starts to play as the credits song, and it was just so emotional. I think out of all the moments in the film, I cried the most at the credits. Just hearing that song was just the pinnacle of everything. It made every film feel so relevant and so connected as one. And seeing Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss Everdeen's evolution as a character was phenomenal. Seeing her as this hopeless little girl from District 12 who had the courage to volunteer for her sister, but even though she knew she couldn't protect her sister's life, and seeing how that she could stand up and face the rebellion and bring change to the world, but still in this midst of this horror, somehow managed to find a somewhat happy ending. Oh, so much. Just so great and so beautiful. Wow, you guys. So there you have it, guys. That was my spoiler-heavy review for Mockingjay Part 2. What did you think of this movie, you guys? What was your favorite scene in this movie? Let me know in the comment section below. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and may the odds be ever in your favor. And until next time, you guys, I'm the Slash Movier, and you guys have just been slashed.